What up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Let's Ask Paul, the podcast where you get to ask me, Paul Abernathy, any question you want about the National Electrical Code. I'll give you my opinion. You can agree to disagree, or you can learn from it and move on, or you could debate it on other social media platforms and look like an ass. That's up to you. But thanks for joining me here on today's podcast. Now, if you're not familiar with the locations that you can actually listen to our podcasts on, we have almost 1,000 episodes spread out across our different podcast platforms, whether it's the Let's Ask Paul or Master the NEC podcast, or even the new Sparky Mafia podcasts. We even have Electrify podcast. So there's many episodes out there, all different topics dating back many years. So scroll through them. You'll see something that piques your interest and go ahead and listen to that episode. But you can listen on all of your favorite listening platforms like Spreaker, Deezer, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify is the one I listen to the most, Spotify. And again, you can also do it from your phone if you get our mobile app, which is free. Just go to our website, fasttracksystem.com, and you'll see the mobile app link in the navigation. Just go there, click on it. It'll ask you to download it. Just download it. You're not installing anything on your phone except for an icon. That's all you're installing. And so it's a PWA. It's a progressive web app, means it's based in the cloud, but it acts like an app on your phone for all intents and purposes. It's an app. It just doesn't take the resources from your phone. And I'm big about that. I don't want to put stuff in your phone. I want to give you access to stuff, but I don't want to put it in your phone. So, but that's our app. You can get it. Just go to our website. You can also go to www.necchat.com as well and download our mobile app as well. That's what you prefer to do it that way. Okay, got a great episode today. A question was sent in to me asking me to explain a calculation for ranges. And without, I think I've done enough videos and training about ranges in itself and how you calculate them that it makes it kind of hard to kind of convey that in a podcast without physically seeing it. So over on Fast Tracks Tube, we have a part 1 and part 2 series that's based on range calculations that you can watch there. But one thing that I noticed in the question that I want to really talk about today is they said, Paul, I get how you do it if I have 3 ranges and one of them is 5 kW, one is 5 kW, 6 kW, and 8 kW. Well, of course, all of those are going to fall under column B. And note 3 says you can compare B to C because C, you could take the 3 and it simply would be the value from column C. Remembering that column A and B in table 220.55 are actually percentages, whereas column C is actually the demand factor, the demand value, right? The maximum demand itself, okay? So it can get confusing, for example, when you're applying the different notes and when you can apply the notes and what happens if you happen to have a situation where they fall under column B and column C. Now, always remember that the notes say that you can use column C column C is to be used in all cases, except where note 3 comes into play. So note 1 and note 2 are just dealing when you have ranges that are over 12 that are either all the same or unequal ratings. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. You're still using column C, but you're applying the notes. And it talks about, again, how you do that. I think what becomes more confusing for people, and it's not going to be so much a real world environment, because I'm going to be honest with you, when you have a multifamily dwelling, things like that, typically you're going to use the optional method anyway. So you're not going to be using table 220.55. But for an exam, this is where people get confused, because in an exam, you never know what kind of crap they're going to throw at you. And in this case, for those that are taking an exam, you might get some wonky question. I doubt it that you'll get it the way I'm getting ready to present it. But if you did, you might get one where it says, well, I have a 9 kW range, and I have a 5 kW range and a 6 kW range, right? And you're thinking, okay, wait a minute. So in all cases, you're going to use column C to establish your KW first. So that's 3 cooking appliances, 3 different ranges, right? So in that scenario, your left column, you just simply go down to 3 and you go all the way to the right. That's column C. That's your demand in KW. And that would be 14 KW, right? Makes sense? But sometimes people forget, and this is where I think it gets controversial, and some people agree and disagree here. But some people believe that if it all doesn't follow perfectly under column C, then you just have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't believe that's the intent of it. Now, the side effect of that is it could end up being something kind of wonky, and I'll show you this just in an example that we just did. But so a 9, a 5, and a 6 kW range all together, okay? And this is for the service or feeder load calculation, by the way. All right, not a branch circuit. Okay, so if the 3 appliances and you were to take and you use column C, which is what you use unless note 3 is applicable, then it would be 14 kW, right? For a 9, a 6, and a 5. Makes sense? That's easy. Just go to 14, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, and be done. However, note 3 does come into play for 2 of these ranges, not all 3. So there are people that believe at this point that you just can't use the column B, that you just have to stick with the column C, and then that's just 14 is it. I don't believe that is the case for me. I believe that you can split these up, and I'm sure some other people will say I'm wrong. But again, if you go looking on the internet, you go looking around, you're going to see it's a taboo topic. No videos, no discussions. Nobody wants to talk about it. And so I'm going to talk about it. So obviously we know that 14 kW can be used. That one's easy because none of those exceed 12. You with me? So the question is, can I break this calculation up and do the 2 ranges that fall under column B and do separately for column C and then add the totals together? And I believe you can. I believe that not all of them fall nicely under note 3, and the ones that don't have to use C. And the ones that do fall under note 3. And for those that want to know what note 3 is, that is over 1 3/4 kW through 8 3/4 kW. So through means including 8 3/4, okay? Whereas note 2 is over 8 3/4, okay? And so I think what happens here is that you have no choice but to separate these out. The code is not clear to say, hey, you know what? Hey, if that all doesn't fall nicely under the neat little package of column C, then you just gotta go with column C and screw all these other abilities to use these demands. That's not what I see when I read it. Now, if that's what they mean, then the code panel needs to clarify that. And I've never, to be honest with you, I've never sent in a public input on this because typically it's not going to be this albatross that we're talking about. Usually if you look at videos and training and books and everything, it all falls nice and neatly into all of the ranges. If you have multiple ranges, they're all over 8 3/4. And then it makes it easy, right? Because you just do it. And if you happen to have any that are over 12 and they're unequal ratings, then you use note 2. And any of them that is less than 12, you just make 12. So if it was a 9, a 10, or 11, you just make it a 12 and you just do your math. You get an average. Once you get that average, and once that average, you want to see how many that exceeds 12. And it's 5% for every KW that exceeds 12. If you don't understand what I'm saying there, because it is a podcast, make sure you go to fasttrackstube.com. That's fasttrackstube, FASTTRAXTUBE. And we have videos over there that talk about range calculations. It's a part 1 and a part 2, and it explains it in extreme detail. But me, like everybody else, I explain the easy to understand aspects of that, the straightforward stuff. But I think what we don't talk about is what happens if not everything fits nicely under column C, but the other ranges are applicable to note 3. Can you separate it, or does it all have to be under? And I don't think that they're, in my opinion, and again, you'll have people out there to say Paul is stupid, whatever, he doesn't get it, whatever. But I haven't seen your videos. I haven't seen your articles. I haven't seen you teaching it when you do have two that are under 8 3/4, let's say, and then you have one range that is over 8 3/4, and how you would apply that. Now, I do see an example in the handbook, and I believe the example in the handbook is wrong, because in the handbook, it says that you use note 2 and you take any that are rated 8 kW and you make them 12. If you go back and look at the public inputs, or at this point it was ROPs back in 84, you'll see that this was tried to get explained a little bit by Tom Henry in a submission, and it ended up being rejected, and the code panel made it clear that note 2 does not apply to any range unless it's over 8 3/4. And that's what the code panel said. So in the example in the handbook under 220.55, or the example in Link, it says that you take that 8 kW and you make it a 12. I don't believe you can do that personally, because it's not over 8 3/4. So that's why I think that's an error in the handbook. It's an error, in my opinion, in Link, because the charging statement for note 2 is that it only is applicable if it is over 8 3/4 through 27. Okay, so I think that you're forced to have to split these up. You're still going to compare them to C, because we already know 14,000 in C is a value that we could just take all three of them and go all the way to column C. That's acceptable. But I think you're able to split these up. And so how would this look? Well, that one range that's the 9 kW, using column C for that one, because the charge says you use column C all the time unless note 3 applies. Well, note 3 doesn't apply to that one. So it would be 8 kW for that one 9 kW range, right? Because again, it's one appliance. Column C says 8 kW can be used. Remember, folks, if it is a 9 kW range, it still would only use 8,000 in the calculation. If it was a 10, 11, or even a 12, you're still only going to use 8 kW for the single range, okay? It's important that you understand that concept when it comes to service and feeder calculations. Now, looking at the information, if we were to do this and dissect it out, let's see what the difference would be. So we know 14 kW is our base for the three, because none of those exceed 12. Okay, so we're in column C. No notes are necessary. Don't need to hit any notes for that type of thing. All right, so in this case, what if we draw back in the two appliances that fall under column B? So we're separating it out. We're using note 3, and we have two appliances, and the multiplier here, the percentage, is 65%. So you take the nameplate. So it's 6,000. Remember in our example, 6,000 plus 5,000. And in case you forgot, we said, what do you got when you've got a 6,000, a 5,000, and a 9,000 kW set of ranges here? What do? Okay. So that's 11,000. Now we could take that times 65%, and that's 7,150. And then, and that's using column B. And then to me, at that point, now I would add the value from column C to that value, right? And that would be the 8. So I would take the 7,150 plus 8, and that is 15,150. So column C, by using the three appliances, yields the best result. That's 14,000. So that's what I would use. I would use column C in that case. So I think that what happens here is, and at the end of the day, it's probably in the real world not going to make much of a difference. Okay, a little bit here or there for the service cap, but it's not going to be dramatically devastating to your load calculation. Hell, half of the people out there probably aren't doing load calculations anyway. They're just looking at it and going 200 amp, 150 amp, 100 amp, 400 amp, and they're just doing it. And so there's a lot of headroom there. But I think that it's important for me when I'm trying to talk about things that people won't talk about. It is, okay, I've got 3 ranges, and they don't all fit nice and neatly in any one column. Now, obviously, again, I can use C because as long as none of them are over 12, then I can just pull the KW demand from column C. And that's where we got the 14. But in my case, it falls in multiple columns. And so the 1 falls in C because it's not over 12. And the other one falls in column B. I'm permitted to use column B by note 3. Okay. So I'm going to apply it to note 3. Okay. And I think that the foundation for this is really, if you go look at note 3, it says, you know what, you can do column A separately, column B separately, and add them together. And that's okay. So I think here the same logic would be that I can do the column, whatever it is. And then if there's a range that falls outside of column A or B that actually falls under C, then I'm going to use column C. And again, for one range, it'd be 8,000. And so I add that to the value I get from column B, and I think that's that option. And in this case, that exceeds the 14, so I'm going to go with column C because that's the best value. That's the lowest value that we'd be able to utilize. So, I mean, I fully understand that there'll be some people that say, no, you have to go. In all cases, you have to go with column C because it's not perfect. All of them don't fall outside of column A or B. And of course, none of them exceeded 12, so you always know that column C has to be used. But it tells you that you're permitted to use note 3. I don't see anything in here that says all of them have to fall under note 3. I don't see any of that. And so if somebody thinks that's what you do, then I encourage them to submit a change to the National Electrical Code. And if you didn't do it for the 2026, that boat has sailed. But at the end of the day, I really don't see the harm either way. I'm able to apply some demands. In this case, C was better than taking the values in B and adding them to the values in C, right? So again, I think it works out. And again, I fully understand that some people will say, nope, you never can intermix column B with column C and all that kind of stuff. And personally, I disagree. I think that you're forced to do that because I don't know how because in the handbook, which adds to the problem, again, I'll reiterate, if you go look at the handbook, it says that when you had these multiple ranges, it says that any of them that are less than 12 that you take at 12. But you can't get there. And remember, I told you the public input from 1984 that Tom Henry submitted, and the code panel responded with a simple answer. It says, Note 2 is not applicable to any range that is less than 8 3/4. Right? So there any range that is not over any range that is 8 3/4 or less, it doesn't apply. You can't use note 2. It's got to be over 8 3/4 through 27 kW. So then they made it really clear. So I don't know that there's any other way that you can apply this. To be honest with you, now in the real world, it's probably again never going to be an issue. Probably never going to come up. I think multifamily dwellings are probably all going to have the same size range anyway. So it's probably a moot point. But I think for exams, you just have to be aware of it, and because you never know what could appear on an exam. And there's a good chance that the people that submitted it to the exam or that helped write the question don't understand it either. But again, I don't see anything that says that as long as note 3 is applicable to any of the ranges, I see nothing that says that I can't apply that. Whether somebody feels personally or strongly otherwise, then I encourage you to email me and explain your position to me. Help me understand why I could not split these loads up. And my email address is support, SUPPORT, at fasttracksystem.com. That's FASTTRAXSYSTEM.com. I'm not interested in your opinion, okay, because your opinion's your opinion. My opinion's my opinion. But if you have some kind of data to back it up, to say that you can't, don't send me no crap that says, well, Paul, it's logical. You can't because they all don't. I don't want to hear it. You're going to have to justify it to me. Otherwise, it's just conjecture and it doesn't do any good for me. All right. I want to learn like everybody else. Okay. And I see nothing in here that says that I can't apply Note 3 to any of the ranges that would be applicable to Note 3. And those that are not, I continue to use like what the code says. I use column C for that. And that's how I would do it. Okay. All right, folks, hopefully that explains it to you, at least my position on it, because there has been recently people asking about that. And I just wanted to give you my opinion on that based on what I read 220.55. Now, again, in real life, you're going to use the optional method. And at that point, you're just going to take nameplates from everything and you're going to the values from the nameplates. And at the end of the day, it's fairly simple because you're going to go to the 220.84, right? And when you go to 220.84, then it's pretty straightforward. You're just going to go to the number of dwelling units. In this case, let's say there was however many there was, and you're going to see a percentage demand, and that's what you would do for that, okay? And that's going to be what your range contribution would be for that. But typically, you don't really use table 220.84b until you've added everything up, and then you go there. But that doesn't stop you from, if somebody asks you an optional method for a certain number of ranges in a certain number of multifamily dwelling units, that you could also use this, okay, for 3 or more multifamily to come up with the range contribution, because you're simply just taking nameplate values for that. I mean, that's what it tells you to do, right? So ultimately, hopefully that answers any question you might have from my opinion on it. You can agree to disagree. Until then, take care, stay safe, God bless, and we'll see you in another episode of Let's Ask Paul.